Hi everyone, I'm Sergeant First Class Brian Sakawa, and this is a saxophone. The saxophone was invented by Belgian instrument maker Adolphe Sax to combine the power of the brass with the agility of the woodwinds. I think the saxophone is one of the coolest instruments, and I actually started playing it in 4th grade because I had a friend who was taking private saxophone lessons, and he was like the coolest guy in the world. So I had to be like him. Other than being really cool, one of my favorite things about the saxophone is its beautiful tone.
Hi everybody, I'm Chief Musician Jonathan Yannick, and today we're talking about my instrument, the saxophone. And I've played it for over 25 years, and I still love it so much because I'm learning something new every day about playing it or being a musician. Saxophone's like one of the middle range instruments in the band. It kind of fills in the sound in the middle, and it's also a woodwind instrument in the woodwind family, and it means I make the sound on the instrument by playing the reed here, so that the vibrations from the reed on the mouthpiece go through the horn and make the music that you hear. Saxophone has a big range and is very versatile. Here, I'll give you a little bit of the taste of the range, starting from the middle to the bottom. So that's the lowest note on the alto saxophone, and then going up. To the very highest notes there on the saxophone in the altissimo range. The saxophone can play very haunting, beautiful, soft melodies, as well as very technical, athletic things as well, such as this violin piece I'm going to play.
Hi, my name's Simon Haram. I'm a freelance classical saxophone player based in London. Because of the nature of the instrument, I get to play with a lot of bands and ensembles, but a good chunk of the time I get to play with symphony orchestras. I'm also lucky enough to be first call at the Philharmonia Orchestra. The saxophone doesn't appear that often in the core repertoire of the symphony orchestra, so it doesn't make sense to have a saxophone player full-time in the orchestra. However, lots of famous composers have used the instrument over the years, so orchestras always have a relationship with the saxophone player so that they can bring them in when needed. In this guide, I'm going to show you how the saxophone works, tell you a bit about its history, and play some of the greatest moments from the orchestral repertoire. So of course, the saxophone is very well known in jazz, rock and roll, pop music, not so well known for the orchestral repertoire. However, an awful lot of very famous composers have used it over the years. The saxophone family has many different members. It starts with the sopranino, which is about this big, and then it goes down all the way to the subcontrabass, which you have to stand on a chair to play. There are only a few of those in existence, I'm happy to say. More recently, although the saxophone is classed as a woodwind instrument, it's actually made out of brass. It does have a mouthpiece and a single reed, very similar to the clarinet, but obviously it's a different shape and size. There are 3 parts to the saxophone: the main body, the crook, and the mouthpiece. The crook attaches to the body at the top. You slide it in, and then do the screw up a little bit to stop it sliding about. Then the mouthpiece attaches to the top of the crook. It just slides over the cork. If you pull the mouthpiece off, the instrument gets flat. If you push the mouthpiece further on, the instrument gets sharp. Next, you attach the reed to the mouthpiece using the ligature. The ligature slides onto the mouthpiece, and then you slide the reed underneath the ligature and just tighten it up. The sound gets created on the saxophone a bit like a party blower. In fact, it sounds very similar if you just play the mouthpiece on its own. Basically, you're sending some air through a very thin gap. That makes the reed vibrate which in turn vibrates the air, and so you hear a sound. With the mouthpiece attached to the instrument, you've got a way of changing the length of pipe that the sound is being sent down. That gives you a way of changing the pitch. As you add fingers, the pipe gets longer, and so the pitch gets lower. As you remove your fingers, the opposite happens. The pipe gets shorter, and the pitch goes up. Sounds a bit like this. The saxophone's unusual in that it was actually invented rather than developed over a period of time. Most instruments were tinkered with and adjusted by lots and lots of different instrument makers, but we know that one man, Adolphe Sax, invented the saxophone all on his own. He invented it in around the 1840s and patented it in 1846. He was a bit of a mad professor and invented lots and lots of different instruments. He was also a bit of an eccentric and a showman. The idea for the saxophone came about when the Belgian military asked Adolphe Sax to develop something which was a similar range to the bassoon and the bass clarinet, but would be a bit more robust for the parade ground. The first instrument he developed was the baritone sax, because it's a similar range to the bassoon. Unlike the clarinet, the holes on the saxophone are quite big. You couldn't cover them with your fingers on your own. So they have rather large pads that you activate with your fingers, but they close bigger holes. Obviously, there are pads all over the instrument and your fingers can't reach the whole instrument. So some of the mechanisms allow you, for example, with this little finger, to move these pads down here. And with this finger, I can move a pad right up here. That's because your fingers can't cover the distance because the tube is just too long. You may have noticed that I'm holding the instrument on a strap. That's because the instrument is a little bit too heavy to hold just on its own. Basically, the strap takes the weight of the instrument and you steady it with your thumb. Some players make the mistake of trying to hold the instrument up with your thumb. That actually gives you a sore wrist, so it's better to let the neck strap do the hard work. There are some similarities between the saxophone and other woodwind instruments, especially the fingering. If you play the flute or the oboe, you'll find that the fingering is pretty similar. However, the actual way of making the sound is closer to the clarinet, although obviously because it's a different shaped reed and a different size mouthpiece, the embouchure is a little different. So the basic quiet sound is a little bit like this. Then we can play full volume. Most of the time, the saxophone is used in quite a prominent way in the symphonic repertoire. I think this is probably because of the nature of the sound that it makes. But also initially, composers weren't quite sure what to do with it, so it was safer to use it as a solo instrument. One of the earliest uses of the saxophone, which is still played reasonably commonly today, was Georges Bizet's L'Arlésienne. This was written for a play, but was later on made into 2 orchestral suites. The saxophone appears in many solos throughout both suites, but this is one of the most beautiful ones.
Some important information about starting saxophone. It's a member of the woodwind family, even though it's made out of brass. Most performance opportunities include bands, jazz bands, solos, and chamber music. Commonly requires starting on clarinet successfully before trying out to play saxophone in many band programs. Most families would obtain a saxophone through one of our approved local band music stores as a monthly rental. The ideal saxophone student would be easygoing, but likes to do well in front of others. They are outgoing, unafraid to try new things or make new friends, as well as having multiple interests in things like art, music, sports, games, etc. Is willing to learn multiple woodwind instruments, as that is a common need for saxophone players. Has basically an aligned jaw without a severe overbite. They can make a face where their chin looks somewhat flat and pointed, keeping top and bottom teeth aligned. Can blow a fast, cool airstream for an appropriate amount of time. Has agile finger flexibility without double-jointed issues to keep fingers naturally curved. Saxophone equipment that is needed every day by a saxophone student would be an approved brand saxophone, either Yamaha, Vito, or Selmer, 4 functional Van Doren reeds on hand at all times. They're normally sold in a box of 10. Either a Selmer C-Star or a Van Doren AL3 mouthpiece. A Rovner ligature, which holds the reeds to the mouthpiece. A neck strap needed to play every day. A swab for cleaning the inner tubing from excess moisture after playing. And optionally, students can get a heavy-duty reed guard for storing their reeds, and they could also optionally get key oil. Both of those would come in a care kit with some of the other materials anyway. Things to avoid when starting saxophone as a beginner. Avoid obtaining a scary brand instrument from a non-music specialized online source. Avoid purchasing another brand not already listed or a used saxophone without consulting your band teacher first. Avoid beginning the instrument without first-hand instruction from your band teacher or an approved saxophone instructor. Avoid not willing to practice patiently a small chunk of time daily. Avoid leaving the reed on the mouthpiece or using the same reed every day.